At the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore on May 31, 2025, Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro cast significant doubt on the long-speculated purchase of F-16 fighter jets from the United States. His remarks, reported on June 2nd, came in stark contrast to earlier momentum surrounding the deal. Teodoro firmly stated, "As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing on the table for me to consider," adding that no decision has been made on either the timing or the model for acquiring multi-role fighters. He dismissed reports of a pending purchase as mere media hype, signaling that the Philippines is still far from committing to the proposed deal. The department approved a potential arms sale to the Philippines that included 20 F-16 fighter jets, specifically 16 F-16C and 4 F-16B Block 77 variants, along with missiles, bombs, and related systems. The total package was valued at $5.58 billion, just shy of the Philippines' entire annual defense budget, which stands at approximately $6 billion. Given that this accounts for around 1.3% of the country's GDP, the cost of acquiring the F-16 has raised questions of affordability and fiscal sustainability within the Philippine defense establishment. Philippine Ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez, echoed these concerns, describing the F-16 as more of an aspiration than an imminent reality. "We're not closing the door on this," he said, "but we need a structure that does not place too heavy a burden on our finances." Romualdez emphasized that the Philippines is currently prioritizing land-based defense systems, aligned with its evolving national security strategy. While talks are ongoing with Lockheed Martin to explore cost-effective pathways, officials have reiterated that more urgent defense needs must come first. The broader geopolitical context remains tense. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth warned that the threat posed by China could be imminent, urging Indo-Pacific allies to bolster their defense spending.
Again, to be clear, any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent. We hope not, but it certainly could be. Facing these threats, we know that many countries are tempted by the idea of seeking both economic cooperation with China and defense cooperation with the United States. Now, that is a geographic necessity for many.
In this regard, Secretary Teodoro did not mince words about Beijing, saying China has a lot of trust building to do to be an effective negotiating partner, and that we have to call a spade a spade.
And thus, for dialogue to be effective, it must be coupled with trust. And China has a lot of trust building to do to be an effective negotiating partner in dispute settlement. We have to call a spade, and that's what we see, and that is the biggest stumbling block to dispute resolution or dialogue with China. That deficit of trust.
While Manila remains closely aligned with Washington on security matters, including receiving $500 million in long-term U.S. military aid in 2024, it is proceeding cautiously when it comes to high-cost weapons acquisitions, like the F-16 seeking capability without compromising economic stability. Globally, the F-16 remains a widely used platform with over 3,100 units in service across 28 countries. However, for the Philippines, owning such advanced aircraft remains a long-term goal rather than a near-term commitment. For now, Manila's defense trajectory favors more cost-effective systems that support its shift from internal security to external deterrence in a region increasingly shaped by great power competition. In April 2025, the U.S. State Department formally approved a potential arms deal with the Philippines, signaling Washington's willingness to enhance Manila's airpower through the sale of advanced F-16 fighter jets. The proposed package includes 20 F-16, specifically 16 F-16C Block 72 and 4 F-16 D Block 77 aircraft, among the most modern variants of the iconic multi-role fighter. These jets come equipped with cutting-edge capabilities such as the ANAPG-83 Active Electronically Scanned Array Radar, a high-resolution center pedestal display, CPD, and the Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System, AUTO-GCS, which together significantly enhance survivability, situational awareness, and combat effectiveness. Beyond the aircraft themselves, the deal is comprehensive, covering a full suite of weaponry, engines, and support systems. This includes 24 engines, 20 installed, 4 spares. Either the F110-GE-129D or F100PW229, depending on the jet variant. The package also features 22 AESA radars, 12 sniper advanced targeting pods, and a large inventory of missiles and bombs. Notably, it includes 112 AIM-120C8 AMRAAMs, 40 AIM-9X Block II, Sidewinders with 32 captive training missiles, 36 GBU-39B small diameter bombs, 60 Mk-82 500-pound bombs, and 60 Mk-84 2,000-pound general-purpose bombs. Additional assets include JDAM kits for precision guidance, M61A 120mm cannons, missile launchers, secure communications, navigation systems, and logistical support equipment. The total estimated value of this extensive package is $5.58 billion. However, the financial implications of this deal are immense for the Philippines. With an annual defense budget of approximately $6 billion, or about 1.3% of the country's GDP, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, the proposed F-16 acquisition would consume nearly the entire annual military allocation. More specifically, the Armed Forces of the Philippines, AFP, modernization budget for 2025 highlights just how steep this purchase would be. Only 35 billion Filipino pesos, around 598 million USD, is guaranteed funding, as per the 2025 General Appropriations Act. An additional 40 billion Filipino pesos, 684 million USD, falls under unprogrammed appropriations, which are conditional on surplus government revenues and therefore not assured. As reported by Philstar.com on January 7, 2025, only 35 billion pesos of the military's 75 billion Filipino pesos modernization budget for 2025 is guaranteed as actual funding. Meanwhile, 40 billion pesos was lodged under unprogrammed appropriations, which are standby appropriations outside the approved government fiscal program that do not have definite funding sources. This fiscal context underscores the daunting financial challenge of acquiring the F-16, prompting Philippine officials to frame the jets more as a long-term aspiration than an immediate necessity. Without a sustainable funding structure or significant foreign financing assistance, the high cost of the deal remains a critical roadblock.
The U.S. military has released video of yet another Chinese fighter jet harassing and flying dangerously close to a U.S. military plane.
That a Chinese fighter jet intercepted a U.S. reconnaissance aircraft over the South China Sea and performed what American military officials are calling, and I'm quoting now, an unsafe maneuver.
The proposed F-16 sale must be understood within the broader geopolitical landscape of intensifying U.S.-China rivalry and Washington's renewed efforts to strengthen alliances in the Indo-Pacific. In March 2025, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited Manila, meeting with Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. His visit marked a significant moment in reaffirming the U.S.-Philippines alliance, as Teodoro publicly acknowledged Washington's critical role in helping secure a partial waiver for foreign military financing, FMF, to aid the Philippines. "We are grateful for the enduring support of the United States," Teodoro stated, emphasizing that this progress was achieved in no small way through the efforts of Secretary Hegseth and the rest of the team.
We are grateful for the enduring support of the United States, including the State Department's issuance of a waiver, in part, in no small way, through the efforts of Secretary Hegseth and the rest of the team, for a waiver of foreign military financing for the Philippines.
2 months later during the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore on May 31st, 2025. Secretary Hegseth delivered a stark warning about China's growing military assertiveness. In his keynote speech, he bluntly stated, "We are not going to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real, and it could be imminent." Hegseth accused Beijing of harassing Taiwan and preparing to use force to alter the strategic balance in the Indo-Pacific. China seeks to intimidate you in your own waters, he warned, making direct reference to China's aggressive behavior in the South China Sea and toward regional allies.
It has to be clear to all that Beijing is credibly preparing to potentially use military force to alter the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. We know, it's public, that Xi has ordered his military to be capable of invading Taiwan by 2027. The PLA is building the military needed to do it, training for it every day, and rehearsing for the real deal. Admiral Paparo has spoken very clearly about this on multiple occasions. Again, to be clear, any attempt by Communist China to conquer Taiwan by force would result in devastating consequences for the Indo-Pacific and the world.
His remarks sparked backlash from Beijing, with China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs accusing Hegseth of inciting conflict and confrontation and promoting a Cold War mentality.
美国在香格里拉对话会上，伙同日本、澳大利亚、菲律宾大肆炒作所谓中国威胁，借东海、南海问题挑拨、煽动地区国家对抗。中方对此强烈不满和坚决反对，已提出严正交涉，搞集团政治和阵营对抗是冷战思维。
In his speech, Hegseth also urged U.S. allies in the Indo-Pacific to ramp up their defense expenditures, calling for a commitment comparable to the 5% of GDP now expected from some NATO members. We must all do our part, he emphasized, asserting that ultimately, a strong, resolute, and capable network of allies and partners is our key strategic advantage. China envies what we have together, but it's up to all of us to ensure we live up to that potential by investing. From the Philippine perspective, the initial reaction to the proposed F-16 sale was generally positive. Some officials interpreted it as a clear signal of the United States' long-term commitment to their defense, as well as a vote of confidence in the Philippine military's capacity to operate and maintain such advanced aircraft. However, enthusiasm was tempered by practical concerns. Soon after the U.S. approval, a number of Philippine policymakers began to question whether such an expensive deal could be realistically funded without substantial American assistance. Indeed, financial constraints quickly came to the forefront of public discourse. While the U.S. provided $500 million in long-term security aid to the Philippines in 2024 under the Indo-Pacific Security Supplemental Appropriations Act, sustaining that level of support would require new legislation from Congress. As Defense Secretary Teodoro noted, the reinstatement of this aid is crucial for re-establishing effective deterrence against unwanted and malign influences that threaten stability, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but across the world. However, without a firm congressional commitment to continued FMF support, the financial feasibility of purchasing the F-16 remains uncertain. Further complicating the picture is the existing U.S.-Philippines defense planning framework. On July 29, 2024, during the Biden administration, both countries finalized the Philippine Security Sector Assistance Roadmap, a long-term blueprint aimed at enhancing the armed forces of the Philippines, AFP, and the Philippine Coast Guard over the next 5 to 10 years. The roadmap focuses primarily on maritime and coastal defense, rather than on high-end fighter jets. It prioritizes assets such as air surveillance radars, coastal defense systems, drones, and military transport aircraft, all aimed at improving the Philippines' maritime domain awareness across its vast archipelagic territory. As described in the plan, it largely consists of equipment to help survey and protect the Philippines' vast coastlines, a sentiment echoed by Philippine Ambassador to the United States Jose Manuel Romualdez. We're really looking at other items that are, in view of our national defense strategy, more important than the F-16, he said, adding that cheaper land-based systems are currently a more realistic priority. While F-16 may be considered as priority defense platforms in the long run, they are not an immediate focus of the roadmap, which underscores the Philippine government's current emphasis on defending its maritime territory against Chinese encroachments. Together, these dynamics illustrate the delicate balance Manila must strike, pursuing strategic modernization to counter regional threats, affirming alliance commitments with the U.S., and doing so within the severe financial limits of its current defense budget. The F-16 proposal is therefore more than just a weapons sale. It's a litmus test of how deeply the U.S.-Philippines alliance can be transformed in an era of mounting regional insecurity and escalating superpower competition. At the 2025 Shangri-La Dialogue, Philippine Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro Jr. emerged as one of the most outspoken voices challenging China's narrative on regional security. In a highly charged panel discussion on June 1st, two senior Chinese military officers, Senior Colonel Chi Da-peng and Senior Colonel Zhang Qi from the People's Liberation Army National Defense University, directly confronted Teodoro, questioning the Philippines' increasingly close defense alignment with the United States. Colonel Qi took a subtle jab by referencing Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who has advocated for diplomacy over confrontation with Beijing. Qi provocatively asked whether Manila intended to act as a proxy for external powers.
And my question is for the Philippine Secretary of Defense. As we know, both Vietnam and Malaysia have differences with China in South China Sea. Yet, both countries have effectively managed these differences with China. So my question is, why can't the Philippines do the same? And yesterday, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar mentioned he advised your president to engage dialogue and communication with China. So will the Philippines follow his advice and change its current approach to the South China Sea issue? Or does the Philippines intend to act as a proxy for external powers?
Colonel Zhang added to the pressure, warning of the expanding U.S. military presence in the region, and pointedly asking whether Teodoro feared that a proxy war in Asia might be launched.
Recently, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the Russian-Ukraine war is a proxy war between nuclear powers and needs to be ended. And meanwhile, the United States is selling more arms to this region and setting up more military bases in the Philippines. So, if the proxy war in Europe needs to be ended, are you concerned that a proxy war in Asia might be launched?
Teodoro responded with sharp clarity and unapologetic conviction, dismissing the insinuations. He publicly accused China of sending pretend journalists, a veiled reference to intelligence operatives rather than high-level defense officials, to the forum. His sarcastic retort, "Thank you for the propaganda spiels disguised as questions," drew applause and laughter from the audience, underlining the rare boldness of his tone.
And thank you for the propaganda spiels disguised as questions.
He firmly defended the Philippines' right to sovereign decision-making, stressing that ASEAN member states remain independent nations with distinct territorial integrity. "Let us not forget," he said, "that while we are members of ASEAN, we are sovereign countries, each with its own territorial integrity and sovereignty. And I'm sure that if what China is doing to the Philippines is done to Malaysia or to any ASEAN country, you would see a different reaction."
First, the comparison between the Philippines, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Let us not forget that while we are members of ASEAN, we are sovereign countries, each with its own territorial integrity and sovereignty. And I am sure that if what China is doing to the Philippines is done to Malaysia or to any ASEAN country, you would see a different reaction.
Crucially, Teodoro rejected the idea that the Philippines' South China Sea stance is merely a reflection of great power rivalry. Instead, he blamed the crisis on Beijing's unilateral aggression. The Philippine position on the West Philippine Sea is not a function of Sino-American strategic rivalry, he declared. Instead, it is caused, no doubt, by the overreach of the Chinese Communist Party, of which the most glaring evidence is the 9, 10, or 11 line that has absolutely no basis in international law.
The Philippine position on the West Philippine Sea is not a function of Sino-American strategic rivalry. Instead, it is caused, no doubt, by the overreach of the Chinese Communist Party, of which the most glaring evidence is the 9, 10, or 11 dash line that has absolutely no basis in international law.
This fiery exchange comes amid escalating tensions in the South China Sea, where Chinese maritime forces have repeatedly harassed Philippine vessels within the country's exclusive economic zone. On May 22, 2025, the China Coast Guard used water cannons and sideswiped the BRP Datu Sanday, a government research vessel near Sandy Cay. The attack damaged the ship's port bow and smokestack and marked the first instance of such aggression in the Sandy Cay area, a territory long patrolled by Manila. A month earlier, another incident unfolded near Scarborough Shoal when a Chinese vessel attempted to ram the Philippine Coast Guard ship BRP Cabra. The Philippine side later released video footage revealing the reckless Chinese maneuver. These incidents are not isolated. In January 2025, Philippine authorities suspended a scientific expedition near Sandy Cay after 3 Chinese Coast Guard vessels and a PLA Navy helicopter aggressively shadowed their team. The mounting threat compelled Philippine ships to withdraw, highlighting the peril even non-military missions now face. Most recently, in early May 2025, Chinese military frigates Tong Liao and Liuzhu, along with a China Coast Guard cutter, harassed the Philippine Navy's BRP Emilio Jacinto during a routine patrol near Scarborough Shoal. The armed forces of the Philippines have responded with increasingly strong language. In a statement following the Sandy Cay attack, the military expressed serious concern over Beijing's irresponsible actions and warned that such provocations could lead to misunderstanding that may escalate tensions and impact regional stability. For Manila, China's behavior is not just a nuisance. It is a sustained campaign of coercion that blurs the line between law enforcement and military intimidation. At the root of the conflict lies China's expansive claim over nearly the entire South China Sea, marked by the infamous 9-dash line. This sweeping cartographic assertion overlaps with the exclusive economic zones of several Southeast Asian nations, including the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and Indonesia, as well as Taiwan. In response to Beijing's shifting rhetoric, some Filipino officials now refer to a 10-dash or even 11-dash line to emphasize the arbitrary and ever-expanding nature of China's claims. These claims were dealt a decisive legal blow on July 12, 2016, when the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. The tribunal declared that China's 9-dash line had no legal basis and that several disputed features, such as Mischief Reef and Second Thomas Shoal, fall squarely within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. Yet Beijing rejected the ruling outright, dismissing it as null and void. Since then, China has doubled down on its efforts to enforce its claims through land reclamation, the construction of artificial islands, and the militarization of key outposts, moves that directly contravene international norms. This sustained defiance has drawn increasingly open criticism, and Teodoro's latest remarks represent perhaps the strongest rebuke yet by a sitting Southeast Asian defense chief. Speaking candidly on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue, he argued that genuine dialogue with China remains impossible due to a fundamental deficit of trust. For dialogue to be effective, it must be coupled with trust, he emphasized. That is the biggest stumbling block to dispute resolution or dialogue with China. He further argued that any rational, unbiased observer would reach the same conclusion. Teodoro then broadened his critique, questioning the very notion of a China-led international order. To envision a China-led international order, we only need to look at how they treat their much smaller neighbors in the South China Sea, he said. It runs counter to the peaceful rise they initially promised. For Teodoro, the issue is not only geopolitical, it is deeply moral. He bluntly stated that he cannot trust a government that represses its own people. Summing up Manila's evolving position, he concluded, "For us, our biggest threat is China, and on that, we converge not only with the United States, but with other countries." In both tone and substance, Teodoro's remarks mark a turning point in Philippine defense diplomacy. No longer hedging or softening criticism, Manila is drawing clear lines, asserting its sovereignty, defending international law, and aligning with partners who share its commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. Thank you for tuning into our channel. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analysis of global issues.